Hello and welcome to Orlando Soundwaves. I'm Sandy Denslow and this is week 14, day 60. Today we are reading from John 6, 22 through 59. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but that they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into their boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. Jesus, the bread of life. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, What must we do to do the works that God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one that he has sent." So they asked him, "What sign will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do?" "Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, and it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is from my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never go thirsty. But as I told you, you have seen me, and you still do not believe. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of those who he has given to me, but raise them up on the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." At this, the Jews there began to grumble about him because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." They said, "It is not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know. How can he say this now, that I came down from heaven?" "Stop grumbling among yourselves," Jesus answered. "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, and yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world." Then the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves, "How can this man give us flesh to eat?" Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood and remains in me, and I in them, just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so the one who feeds on me, will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Your ancestors ate manna and died, but whoever feeds on this bread will live forever." He said this while teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. And now let's look to our devotion book for the 7 questions, or the 7 arrows. What does this passage say? What did this passage mean to its original audience? What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about humanity? What does this passage demand of me And how can I use this passage to change the way that I relate to people? And what does this passage prompt me to pray to God? Now let's look at the devotion that is on page 86 of your devotional book, The 7 Arrows. Jesus used many word pictures to communicate who he was and what he was on earth to accomplish. The Gospel of John is filled with stories in which Jesus took a concept that would have been familiar to the people and used that image to help the people understand his work. For example, in John 10, Jesus compares his mission to that of a shepherd he is caring for his sheep. Here, Jesus uses the imagery of bread, particularly the manna God provided for his people in the Old Testament. God sent Jesus as a true and lasting form of food, the kind that would satisfy not simply physical hunger, but spiritual hunger as well. Like the Israelites, the Jewish people of Jesus' day grumbled at the description because Jesus had equated himself with God's salvation. In other words, he said that he was the one that could meet their spiritual needs and save their souls. No one but God could ever say something like that. To those who were not God's people, this news provoked grumbling, but to God's people, it brought great joy. So thanks for joining us this week, and I hope you tune in next week for week 15.